When I saw my husband scrolling through my phone, my heart didn't skip a beat from fear of being caught. It was from knowing he would see those messages. The ones I forgot to delete. I tried to snatch the phone from his hands, but he pulled back smoothly and kept reading. I watched his face change as he read line after line, feeling my life crumble in seconds. Yes, now he would learn the truth. But not the whole truth. His hands trembled as he scrolled further, and I knew he was about to reach that message that would destroy my life. The one that would explain everything and put a final period. Or maybe confuse him even more. My phone suddenly vibrated in his hands, and a new notification appeared on the screen. I saw his face go pale as he read the sender's name. My husband froze. Didn't even blink. I bit the inside of my cheek, an old habit when I'm nervous. My nerves mixed with the horror of realizing what I had done. His breathing quickened. I could hear it even from 6 feet away. This was exactly what I feared most. Because 3 months ago I made a mistake, the kind of mistake that changes everything forever, and now. I didn't know what to do, but let me tell you how it all really happened. Before I share with you the secret I tried so hard to hide for so long, write in the comments what city you're watching this video from, and answer this question: have you ever had a secret you tried desperately to hide, but ultimately failed to keep? The morning routine had become a dance I could perform with my eyes closed. Coffee brewing at exactly 7:15, toast golden brown, his newspaper folded precisely in half beside his plate. 23 years of marriage had reduced us to synchronized strangers, moving through our suburban home like actors who'd forgotten we were supposed to be in love. I stood at the kitchen window, watching Robert's methodical morning ritual. Sip coffee, check phone, grunt at headlines. The same sequence every single day. When had we stopped talking? Really talking, not just coordinating schedules and discussing weather. I tried to remember the last time he'd looked at me, truly looked, and found nothing but a vast, empty space where memories should be. The house felt too quiet, too clean, too perfect. Every surface polished to a shine that reflected nothing but my own restlessness. At 47, I'd achieved everything I was supposed to want: the colonial house with the white picket fence, the successful husband, the respect of our neighbors. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? Margaret, did you call the landscaper? Robert's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade through silk. Yesterday, I replied, not turning from the window. They'll be here Thursday. Good. The Hendersons are having their annual barbecue next weekend. We need the yard looking perfect. Perfect. Everything always had to be perfect. Perfect house, perfect wife, perfect life. But perfection, I was learning, could be its own kind of prison. Outside, I noticed movement in the garage across the street. Jack Martinez was working on another car, his third one this month. He'd moved into the rental house 6 months ago after his divorce, and the neighbors had whispered about it for weeks. A single man in our family-oriented neighborhood was apparently cause for concern. I'd seen him a few times at the mailbox, always nodding politely, sometimes offering a genuine smile that reached his eyes. There was something different about him, something that made me pause mid-step when our paths crossed. He looked at people like he actually saw them, not through them. "I'll be late tonight," Robert announced, gathering his briefcase and keys. Client dinner. Another client dinner. They'd become more frequent lately, these evening obligations that kept him away until well past 10. I used to ask about them, used to care about the details of his day. Now I just nodded and planned my solitary evening around whatever cooking show would help pass the time. The front door closed with its familiar click, followed by the sound of his BMW pulling out of the driveway. The silence that followed felt different today, heavier somehow. I stood in my pristine kitchen, surrounded by everything I thought I wanted, and felt more alone than I had in years. My reflection caught in the chrome surface of the refrigerator a woman approaching 50, still attractive but somehow faded, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. When had the spark in my eyes dimmed? When had I stopped recognizing myself? The sound of an engine backfiring made me look outside again. Jack was bent over the hood of an old Mustang, his t-shirt stretched across shoulders that suggested he did more than just tinker with cars for a living. There was something appealing about his competence, the way his hands moved with confidence and purpose. I shook my head, embarrassed by the direction of my thoughts. This was ridiculous. I was a married woman having inappropriate thoughts about a neighbor I barely knew. But as I turned away from the window, I caught myself glancing back one more time. The day stretched ahead of me like an empty canvas I didn't know how to fill. Book club wasn't until Thursday, the charity committee met next week, and the house was already spotless. This was my life, a series of scheduled activities punctuated by long stretches of beautiful, suffocating nothingness. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat at the breakfast nook, staring at the crossword puzzle Robert had abandoned half-finished. The clue for 7 across read trapped feeling. I knew the answer immediately, caged. 3 days later, my car decided to stage its own rebellion. The engine made a sound like a dying animal as I tried to start it in the grocery store parking lot. After 10 minutes of turning the key and pumping the gas pedal, I admitted defeat and called AAA. 2-hour wait, the dispatcher informed me cheerfully. Sorry ma'am, busy day. I sat in the parking lot, groceries melting in the trunk, feeling more frustrated than the situation warranted. This was exactly the kind of minor crisis that would send Robert into lecture mode about proper car maintenance and the importance of regular service schedules. Need some help? I looked up to see Jack Martinez walking toward my car, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Up close, he was more attractive than I'd realized from my kitchen window observations. Gray threaded through his dark hair, and lines around his eyes suggested someone who smiled often and meant it. I called AAA, I said, then immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. Mind if I take a look? Might be something simple. I hesitated. Robert had strong opinions about accepting help from neighbors, especially male neighbors. But Robert wasn't here, and I was tired of sitting in a hot car waiting for rescue. That would be wonderful, thank you. He popped the hood and peered inside with the focused attention of someone who actually understood what he was looking at. His movements were economical, confident, and I found myself watching his hands as they traced wires and checked connections. When's the last time you had the battery terminals cleaned? He asked, not looking up. Honestly, I have no idea. He chuckled, not mockingly but with genuine warmth. That's fair. Most people don't think about that stuff. Here, let me show you something. He gestured for me to come closer, and I found myself standing beside him, looking into the mechanical mysteries under my hood. He smelled like motor oil and something else, maybe soap, maybe just clean skin. It was distinctly masculine in a way that made me suddenly aware of how long it had been since I'd stood this close to any man other than my husband. See this white crusty stuff around the battery posts? That's corrosion. It's preventing good contact. His fingers brushed mine as he pointed out the problem, and I felt an unexpected jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with car batteries. I think I have some tools in my truck that'll fix this right up, he said. Give me 2 minutes. While he retrieved his tools, I studied his profile through the windshield of his pickup truck. There was something solid about him, grounded in a way that Robert had never been. Robert lived in his head, in strategies and projections and 5-year plans. Jack seemed to inhabit his body comfortably, moved through the world with an ease I envied. He returned with a small toolbox and got to work. I watched, fascinated, as he cleaned and scraped and tightened. His hands were scarred from work, not manicured like Robert's, but there was something appealing about their capability. "Try it now," he said after a few minutes. The engine turned over immediately, purring like it hadn't in months. I felt ridiculously grateful, not just for the repair but for the kindness of the gesture. "I can't thank you enough," I said, meaning it. "Can I pay you something? Buy you lunch?" "Coffee would be nice," he said. "There's a place on Maple Street, if you have time." I should have said no. Should have thanked him again and driven straight home to start dinner preparations. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd like that." The coffee shop was small and mostly empty, the kind of place that felt like a secret in our chain store suburb. We found a corner table, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd sat across from a man and had an actual conversation. He asked about my work. I'd been a teacher before marriage, something I rarely thought about anymore. He listened when I talked, really listened, asking follow-up questions that suggested he was actually interested in my answers. "What about you?" I asked. "Besides rescuing stranded motorists?" "I'm a contractor," he said. "Mostly renovation work. Old houses that need some love." "Do you like it?" "I like fixing things," he said simply. "Taking something broken and making it work again. There's satisfaction in that." I understood exactly what he meant, though I couldn't have articulated why. We talked for an hour about nothing particularly important: books, movies, the quirks of our neighborhood. But underneath the ordinary conversation was something else, an undercurrent of awareness that made my skin feel too tight. When we walked back to our cars, he turned to face me in the parking lot. "Margaret," he said, and the way he said my name made something flutter in my chest. "Thank you," I said. "For everything." "Anytime," he replied, and I knew he meant it. We kissed. It happened so naturally, I almost didn't register the decision to do it. One moment we were standing 2 feet apart, saying goodbye, and the next his hands were gentle on my face and his lips were soft against mine. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but when we broke apart, everything had changed. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my heart pounding like a teenager's. What had I done? What was I doing? The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about foolishness and consequences, but my body hummed with an aliveness I'd forgotten was possible. I spent the next 2 days in a state of barely contained panic. Every time the phone rang, I expected it to be Robert, somehow having discovered my transgression through mysterious husband intuition. Every neighbor I encountered at the mailbox seemed to be looking at me with knowing eyes. But gradually, the panic gave way to something more dangerous: longing. I caught myself watching Jack's house at odd hours, noting when his truck was in the driveway, when lights were on in his windows. The memory of our kiss replayed in my mind at inappropriate moments during grocery shopping, while folding laundry, sitting across from Robert at dinner. "You seem distracted lately," Robert observed on Friday evening as we sat in our respective chairs, him with his laptop, me pretending to read a novel. My heart stopped. "Do I?" "The quarterly reports. You usually have them organized by now." Relief flooded through me. He was talking about my volunteer work with his company's charity foundation, not my emotional state. "I'll finish them this weekend." He nodded and returned to his screen. Crisis averted, but the close call reminded me how precarious my situation was. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. Saturday morning brought another car problem, or maybe I imagined the weird noise the engine was making. Either way, I found myself knocking on Jack's door at 10 a.m., my hands shaking slightly. "Margaret," he said when he opened the door, and again that flutter in my chest. "Everything okay?" "I think there's something wrong with my car," I said, hating how breathless I sounded. He followed me to my driveway and listened to the engine. "Sounds fine to me," he said, giving me a questioning look. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Maybe it stopped doing it. We stood there in the morning sunshine, the lie hanging between us like a confession. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Margaret," he said quietly. "Are you okay with what happened the other day?" The honest answer was complicated. Was I okay with it? No. Did I want it to happen again? Yes. Was I confused and guilty and more alive than I'd felt in years? Absolutely. "I don't know," I admitted. "We could pretend it didn't happen," he offered. "Go back to being neighborly strangers." Could we? I asked, because I genuinely didn't know if that was possible. "Probably not," he said with a rueful smile. We walked to his garage without discussing it, drawn by some gravitational pull neither of us seemed able to resist. The space smelled like motor oil and sawdust, masculine and real in a way my pristine house wasn't. "I've been thinking about you," he said, leaning against his workbench. "I've been thinking about you too," I replied, the admission feeling like jumping off a cliff. "This is complicated," he said. "Very complicated. Your husband seems like a good man." "He is," I said, and meant it. Robert wasn't a villain in this story. He was just absent. That makes it worse, doesn't it? Jack studied my face for a long moment. "What do you want, Margaret?" Such a simple question with such an impossible answer. What did I want? To feel alive again. To remember what it felt like to be desired. To have conversations that mattered. To touch and be touched with intention rather than habit. "I want to feel like myself again," I said finally. "And who is that?" "I don't know anymore. That's the problem." He reached out and touched my hand, just my fingers, but the contact sent warmth shooting up my arm. "Maybe we could figure it out together." I should have said no. Should have thanked him for his kindness and walked away, back to my safe, empty life. Instead, I stepped closer. "I've never done anything like this," I whispered. "Neither have I," he said. "Not with a married woman." "What does that make me?" "Human," he said simply. The word hit me like absolution. Human. Not perfect, not pristine, not the flawless wife and neighbor everyone expected me to be. Just human, with human needs and human desires and human failures. I kissed him this time, rising on my toes to reach his lips, my hands fisting in his shirt. He tasted like coffee and possibility, and when his arms came around me, I felt like I was coming home to myself. When we broke apart, breathless, I knew there was no going back. Whatever this was, wherever it led, I was already lost. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I want to find out." Outside, a car drove past, and the mundane sound reminded me of the world beyond this garage, the world where I was someone's wife, someone's neighbor, someone with a reputation to maintain. But for the first time in years, that world felt less important than this moment, this man, this unexpected awakening of everything I thought was dead inside me. The following week passed in a strange suspended reality. I moved through my normal routines, grocery shopping, cleaning, preparing Robert's meals, but everything felt different, like I was watching someone else live my life. Every mundane task carried the weight of my secret, transforming ordinary moments into exercises in deception. Robert noticed nothing. This should have been a relief, but instead it highlighted how little attention he paid to me anymore. I could have shaved my head or gotten a tattoo, and he probably wouldn't have commented unless it affected his dinner schedule. "The Hendersons' barbecue is tomorrow," he reminded me over breakfast on Friday morning. "Don't forget we're bringing the potato salad." I nodded, stirring my coffee absently. The Hendersons lived 3 houses down from Jack. The thought of being in his proximity while playing the role of dutiful wife made my stomach twist with anxiety and anticipation in equal measure. That afternoon, I found myself in Jack's garage again. I'd stopped pretending there were car problems. We both knew why I was there, and the honesty of it was both terrifying and liberating. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him as he organized tools on his workbench. "About figuring out who I am. And I think I've been sleepwalking for 20 years. Going through the motions of being alive without actually living." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "That's a heavy realization." "I used to paint," I said suddenly, surprising myself. "Before I got married. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes, flowers, sometimes people. I was decent at it." "What happened?" "Robert said it was a nice hobby but not practical for a wife. The supplies took up too much space, and the smell of turpentine bothered him. So I stopped." The words came out flat, matter of fact, but hearing them aloud made me realize how much I'd given up without even fighting for it. "Do you miss it?" "I didn't think I did. But standing here, talking to you, I feel like I'm waking up from a very long sleep." I moved closer to him, drawn by the warmth in his eyes. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," he said softly. "I felt the same way after my divorce. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale." We were standing close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The air between us felt charged, electric with possibility and danger. "Margaret," he said, his voice rough. "If we keep doing this." "I know," I whispered. "I know what it means." "Do you?" "Because I'm not sure I can be casual about this." "About you." The admission hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. I thought about Robert, about my marriage, about the life I'd built so carefully. Then I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who painted sunsets and believed in magic. "I don't want to be casual either," I said. He reached up and touched my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're beautiful," he said. "Not just physically. Your spirit, your mind. You light up when you talk about things you care about." "Robert hasn't called me beautiful in 15 years, I said, then immediately felt guilty for the comparison. "His loss," Jack said simply. We kissed then, longer and deeper than before. His hands tangled in my hair, and I pressed against him, wanting to memorize every sensation. When we broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy and more alive than I'd felt in decades. "I should go," I said, but made no move to leave. "Should and want are different things," he observed. "Very different things." I stayed for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his failed marriage, how they'd grown apart gradually until they were strangers sharing a house. I told him about my teaching days, how I'd loved working with high school students, helping them discover their own voices. "You could teach again," he suggested. "There's no law against it." "Robert thinks I'm too old to start over." "Robert's wrong about a lot of things." The criticism of my husband should have offended me, but instead it felt like validation. Someone saw what I saw, understood what I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. When I finally left his garage, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded me why I'd loved painting landscapes. I stood in my driveway for a moment, just breathing in the beauty of it. Inside, Robert was already home, tie loosened, scrolling through his phone while a baseball game played on television. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. "Fine," I said. "Normal." The lie came so easily it scared me. But the alternative, the truth, would destroy everything. And I wasn't ready for that level of destruction. Not yet. That night, I lay awake listening to Robert's steady breathing and thought about parallel lives. In one, I was the woman I'd always been, safe, predictable, slowly dying inside. In the other, I was someone I barely recognized, alive, reckless, finally awake. The problem was, I was living both lives simultaneously, and I knew eventually I'd have to choose. The Henderson barbecue was everything I'd dreaded and hoped for simultaneously. The entire neighborhood turned out, families spreading across their expansive backyard like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Children ran between the adults, their laughter mixing with the smell of grilling meat and the sound of easy conversation. I helped Susan Henderson arrange side dishes on the buffet table, playing my role as the perfect neighbor wife while my eyes searched the crowd for Jack. When I spotted him near the beer cooler, talking with Tom from 2 streets over, my heart did something complicated in my chest. "Margaret, you look lovely today," Susan commented, following my gaze. "That blue dress is very flattering." I'd chosen it carefully, knowing Jack would see me in it. The realization made me flush with embarrassment and excitement. "Thank you," I managed. Robert appeared at my elbow, beer in hand, already discussing quarterly earnings with Jim Henderson. He nodded at me absently when I touched his arm, but his attention remained focused on profit margins and market projections. I excused myself and wandered toward the garden, where Susan's prize-winning roses bloomed in perfect rows. The beauty of them made my chest ache with longing for my abandoned paints and brushes. "They're gorgeous, aren't they?" I turned to find Jack beside me, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one, our fingers brushing in the exchange. "Breathtaking," I said, though I wasn't looking at the roses anymore. We stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by other people but existing in our own private bubble. The danger of it thrilled me. We were hiding in plain sight, carrying on a conversation with our eyes while the neighborhood watched. "Your husband seems busy," he observed. "He always is." The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. "Are you happy, Margaret? In your marriage?" The question hung between us like a challenge. Around us, people laughed and chatted, oblivious to the seismic shift happening in their midst. "I thought I was," I said finally. "I thought happiness was supposed to be quiet, comfortable, safe. And now? Now I think maybe I confused numbness with contentment." He moved slightly closer, close enough that anyone watching might notice. "What are you going to do about it?" The question terrified me because I didn't have an answer. What was I going to do? Continue sneaking around, stealing moments in garages and gardens? Leave my husband for a man I'd known for 2 weeks? Go back to my carefully constructed life and pretend none of this had happened? "I don't know," I whispered. "That's honest, at least." Robert's laughter carried across the yard, and I looked over to see him gesturing animatedly, probably telling his golf story again. He looked happy, relaxed, completely unaware that his wife was falling apart 20 feet away. "I should go back," I said. "Should," Jack repeated with a slight smile. That word again. But I didn't move, and neither did he. We stood among Susan's perfect roses, drinking wine and pretending to be casual acquaintances while the space between us hummed with tension. Later, when most of the crowd had dispersed and Robert was helping Jim move tables, I found myself alone in the Hendersons' kitchen, washing dishes at Susan's insistence. Jack appeared in the doorway. "Need help?" My hands were shaking as I handed him a towel. We worked in silence, the domestic rhythm both comforting and intimate. When I passed him a clean plate, our hands lingered together longer than necessary. "Margaret." His voice was rough with something that made my knees weak. "I know," I said. "I feel it too." We kissed there in Susan Henderson's kitchen, with the sounds of the lingering party drifting through the window. It was reckless and stupid and absolutely necessary. When we broke apart, I was trembling. Come over tonight, he said quietly. When your husband falls asleep. The invitation hung between us like a precipice. I knew if I said yes, if I crossed that line, there would be no going back. The woman I'd been for 23 years would cease to exist. Okay, I whispered. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I smiled and chatted and helped clean up, but inside I was counting minutes until I could slip away. Robert fell asleep in his chair during the late news, as predictable as sunrise. I waited until his breathing was deep and even, then slipped out the back door like a teenager sneaking out past curfew. The short walk to Jack's house felt like crossing continents. He was waiting for me on his porch, and when he saw me, his expression was so tender it nearly broke my heart. You came, he said. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped, he said. But I know how hard this must be. Inside his house, surrounded by his books and furniture and the smell of his cologne, I felt like I was stepping into an alternate universe. This was what a home felt like when someone actually lived in it, rather than just existing there. We talked for hours about everything: his childhood in Texas, my abandoned dreams, the paths that had led us both to this moment. When he kissed me again, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We spent the night together. I woke before dawn, panic flooding through me as I realized where I was. Jack's arm was around me, his breathing soft against my neck, and for a moment I let myself imagine this was my real life. But reality crashed back quickly. I had to get home before Robert woke up, had to slip back into my other skin and pretend last night had never happened. The walk home in the pre-dawn darkness felt like a journey between worlds, from the vibrant land of the living back to the gray realm of the sleepwalking. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. During the day, I moved through my routines like an automaton, but every night I came alive in Jack's arms. We were careful, cautious, meeting only when Robert worked late or traveled. But the secret felt enormous, threatening to burst out of me at any moment. I started making excuses to avoid social gatherings where I might see Jack in public. The strain of pretending indifference was becoming unbearable. At the same time, I couldn't stop myself from going to him, drawn like a moth to flame. You seem different lately, Robert observed one morning over breakfast. More energetic. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. Do I? Yes. You're humming again. You haven't hummed in years. The observation terrified me. If Robert was noticing changes, what else might he see? I forced myself to sit still, to breathe normally, to project the same bland contentment I'd perfected over decades. I've been sleeping better, I said, which was a lie. I barely slept at all anymore, my mind too full of Jack's touch, his voice, the way he made me feel like a woman worth knowing. Good, Robert said, already returning to his newspaper. The Wilsons' dinner party is Friday. Don't forget. Another social event to navigate, another evening of performance art. I was becoming exhausted by the constant deception, but I couldn't stop. Every stolen hour with Jack felt like coming back to life, and the thought of giving that up was unbearable. That afternoon, I met Jack at a small cafe across town, the farthest I'd ever gone from our neighborhood for one of our secret meetings. The risk was calculated, no one we knew would be there, but the drive itself felt dangerous, like evidence of how far I was willing to go. We can't keep doing this, I said as soon as I sat down across from him. His face fell. Are you ending it? I don't know. Maybe. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Jack. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't focus on anything except you. This isn't sustainable. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. What if we didn't have to sneak around? What do you mean? What if you left him? The words hung between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. Leave Robert. Leave my marriage, my home, my entire life. The suggestion was both thrilling and terrifying. I can't, I said automatically. Why not? Because. I struggled to find words that made sense. Because I've been his wife for 23 years. Because I don't know how to be anyone else. Because it would destroy everything. Everything? Or just everything that's been slowly killing you? His words hit like physical blows. He was right, and I knew it, but knowing and acting were different things entirely. You don't understand, I said. It's not just about me. Robert's career, our friends, the neighbors. Everyone expects us to be this perfect couple. And what about what you expect? What you need? I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. You think it's that simple? Just walk away from everything I've built? I think you've built a prison and called it a palace. The truth of it made me want to scream. Or cry. Or run. Instead, I sat frozen in my chair, staring at this man who saw through every wall I'd constructed. I need time, I said finally. How much time? I don't know. We left the cafe separately, and I drove home in a daze. The house felt smaller when I walked in, the walls closer together, the air thinner. I stood in my pristine living room and tried to imagine explaining to Robert that I was leaving him for another man. The conversation was impossible to envision. That night, Robert made love to me for the first time in months. It was perfunctory, efficient, over quickly, but afterwards he held me closer than usual. I love you, Margaret, he said into the darkness. I love you too, I replied automatically, the lie tasting like ashes in my mouth. But did I? Had I ever? Or had I just loved the idea of being loved, the security of being chosen, the status of being Mrs. Robert Williams? I lay awake until dawn, Robert's arm heavy across my waist, feeling like the worst person who had ever lived. I was a liar, a cheater, a fraud. But underneath the guilt was something else, a desperate, clawing need for the life I'd glimpsed with Jack. By morning, I'd made a decision. I had to end it. Had to go back to being the woman I'd always been, even if it killed me slowly. The alternative, destroying Robert, ruining our reputation, becoming the neighborhood scandal, was too much to bear. I would tell Jack that afternoon. I would end it cleanly, completely, and learn to live with the consequences. But even as I made the decision, I knew I was lying to myself. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And I had crossed so many lines I could no longer see my way back to where I'd started. The meeting with Jack that afternoon never happened. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop for 20 minutes, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every time I reached for the door handle, Robert's words from the night before echoed in my head, I love you, Margaret. 3 simple words that felt like chains around my chest. I drove home without going inside, without seeing Jack, without ending anything. The cowardice of it made me sick to my stomach, but I couldn't force myself to be brave. Not yet. That evening, Robert surprised me by suggesting we go out to dinner. Just the two of us, he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. Like we used to. When was the last time we'd had dinner alone together? I couldn't remember. We drove to Antonio's, the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary dinner 22 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. You've seemed distant lately, Robert said over appetizers, his voice careful, measured. Is everything all right? My heart hammered against my ribs. Did he know? Had someone seen me with Jack? I'm fine, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Just tired, I think. Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison. Get a checkup. You've been different. Different. That word again. I was different completely, fundamentally altered but not in ways any doctor could diagnose or cure. Different how? I asked, genuinely curious about what he'd observed. More. I don't know. Alive, I suppose. But also nervous. Like you're keeping secrets. The breadstick I was holding crumbled in my fingers. What kind of secrets would I be keeping? Robert studied my face with more attention than he'd paid me in years. I don't know. That's what worries me. We finished dinner in relative silence, the weight of his observation hanging between us like a sword. He paid the check and helped me with my coat, playing the role of attentive husband with unsettling conviction. In the car, he reached over and took my hand. Margaret, if something was wrong, really wrong, you'd tell me, wouldn't you? The question felt like a trap. Of course. Because I know I haven't been the most present husband lately. Work has been demanding, and I've probably taken you for granted. But I want you to know that you're important to me. Our marriage is important to me. The timing of this revelation felt cruelly ironic. Where had this awareness been 6 months ago, when I might have been able to work with it? Now it felt like too little, too late, words spoken from across an unbridgeable chasm. I know, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. That night, he made love to me again, slower this time, more attentive. His hands moved over my body like he was trying to memorize it, and when he whispered my name, there was something desperate in it that made my chest ache with guilt. Afterwards, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and realized I was trapped between two impossible choices. Stay with Robert and slowly suffocate, or leave him and destroy us both. There was no clean way out, no path that didn't leave casualties. The next morning brought a new complication. Susan Henderson called while I was making coffee, her voice bright with gossip. Margaret, you'll never guess what I heard at book club yesterday. Apparently, Jack Martinez has been seeing someone. Carol Thompson saw him with a woman at that little cafe on Maple Street. She couldn't see who it was clearly, but she said they looked very intimate. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor. How clumsy of me, I said, kneeling to collect the pieces while my heart hammered. Are you all right, dear? Fine, just startled. What were you saying about Jack? Well, Carol thinks it might be someone from outside the neighborhood, which is probably for the best. Can you imagine the scandal if he was involved with one of us married women? I cut my finger on a shard of ceramic, a thin line of blood appearing across my palm. Yes, I said faintly. I can imagine. After Susan hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor surrounded by broken porcelain and felt the walls closing in. Carol Thompson had seen us. How long before she got a better look? How long before the gossip mill connected the dots? I needed to end this immediately. Today. Before someone else saw us, before Robert heard rumors, before our careful secret exploded into neighborhood scandal. But even as I made the decision, I knew it was already too late. The damage was done, the seeds of discovery planted. Carol had seen enough to start asking questions, and in a neighborhood like ours, questions had a way of finding answers. I spent the rest of the day in a state of barely controlled panic, jumping every time the phone rang, analyzing every neighbor's expression when I collected the mail. By evening, I was exhausted from the constant vigilance. When Robert came home, he found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Rough day, he asked, loosening his tie. Something like that. He kissed the top of my head, a gesture so familiar and comforting that it nearly broke me. This was my husband. The man I'd promised to love and honor and cherish. What was I doing? But then I thought of Jack's hands, Jack's voice, the way he looked at me like I was someone worth seeing, and the guilt was overwhelmed by longing so fierce it left me breathless. That night, I dreamed of standing at a crossroads, with Robert calling my name from one direction and Jack from another. In the dream, I stood frozen, unable to move toward either voice, while the ground beneath my feet began to crack and crumble. I woke with tears on my cheeks and the absolute certainty that time was running out. The end began with a phone call at 7 in the morning. I was in the kitchen, making Robert's coffee, when the phone rang. He answered it in his office, his voice carrying down the hallway in urgent, clipped tones. "What do you mean, they moved the meeting?" A pause. "No, absolutely not. I'll catch the first flight out. Have Jennifer reschedule everything else." My hands stilled on the coffee pot. Robert never traveled on short notice. His entire life was planned weeks in advance, color-coded in his electronic calendar. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, already loosening his tie. "Emergency in the Chicago office. I have to leave within the hour." "How long will you be gone?" 3 days, maybe 4. "I'm sorry, I know it's sudden." He was already moving, gathering papers, checking his phone. This was Robert in crisis mode, efficient, focused, completely absorbed in the problem at hand. "I'll pack for you," I offered. "Thanks. I need to make some calls." An hour later, he was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his cologne and a hastily scribbled note with his hotel information. The house felt different in his absence, bigger somehow, full of possibilities and dangers. I waited until noon before walking to Jack's garage. He was working under the hood of his truck, and when he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that made my chest tight. "I was hoping you'd come by," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yesterday, when you didn't show up at the cafe." "Robert's gone," I said without preamble. 3 days. Something shifted in his expression. "What does that mean?" "It means we have 3 days to figure out what we're doing." He set down his tools and moved closer. "And what do you want to do?" The question I'd been avoiding for weeks hung between us, demanding an answer. What did I want? Everything. Nothing. To run away with him to somewhere no one knew our names. To go back in time and never start this. To be brave enough to choose him. To be good enough to choose Robert. "I want to stop feeling like I'm dying inside," I said finally. "Then stay with me. Really stay. Not just stolen hours in garages and coffee shops. Stay." The invitation terrified me. 3 days and nights together, playing house, pretending we were a real couple instead of two people destroying everything in their path. It was reckless and stupid and everything I wanted. "Okay," I whispered. Those 3 days existed outside of time, outside of consequence. We cooked dinner together in his kitchen, watched old movies on his couch, talked until sunrise about books and dreams and the roads we hadn't taken. For 72 hours, I let myself believe this could be my life. On the second night, as we lay in his bed listening to rain against the windows, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "What happens when he comes back?" I turned to face him in the darkness. "I don't know. Margaret, I need to know if this is real for you. If you're thinking about leaving him." "It's real," I said, and meant it. "But leaving him? I don't know if I'm brave enough." "What would it take to make you brave enough?" I thought about it seriously. I think I'd need to believe there was something real waiting for me on the other side. Not just passion or excitement, but something sustainable. Something worth the destruction. "And do you believe that?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "When I'm with you, it feels possible. But when I think about actually doing it, about the conversations and the lawyers and the looks from neighbors." "You're scared." "Terrified." He pulled me closer, and I felt the steady rhythm of his breathing against my hair. "I love you," he said quietly. The words hung in the darkness like a revelation. No one had said those words to me in so long I'd forgotten how they felt. Not the casual love you too that Robert and I exchanged out of habit, but real words, weighted with meaning and risk. I love you too, I whispered back, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The third morning arrived gray and drizzling, carrying with it the weight of returning reality. Robert would be home that evening, and I would have to slip back into my other life, my other skin. I was making coffee in Jack's kitchen when I saw her through the window. Carol Thompson, walking her dog past his house, moving slower than usual, her head turned toward the windows. "Jack," I said, my voice strange and high. "There's someone outside." He came to stand beside me, following my gaze. Carol had stopped completely now, standing on the sidewalk, staring directly at the kitchen window where we stood in our bathrobes, morning light illuminating us like actors on a stage. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Carol raised her hand in a small wave, her expression unreadable, and continued walking. "She saw us," I said unnecessarily. "Yes. She'll tell everyone." "Probably." I sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of exposure crushing down on me. "It's over. Everything is over." Jack knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. "Maybe it's time for it to be over. Maybe this is the push you needed. You don't understand. This will destroy Robert. Destroy everything. What about you? Will it destroy you to keep living a lie?" The question echoed in my head as I walked home an hour later, as I cleaned the house and prepared dinner and waited for Robert's return. Carol Thompson knew. By tomorrow, half the neighborhood would know. By next week, everyone would know. The life I'd built so carefully, so perfectly, was about to come crashing down. And I still had no idea what I was going to do about it. Robert came home that evening carrying flowers and wearing the slightly guilty expression of a man who'd been neglecting his wife. "For being so patient with my crazy schedule," he said, kissing my cheek. I took the flowers, yellow roses, my supposed favorites, though I preferred wildflowers, and arranged them in a vase while he talked about his meetings in Chicago. His voice was animated, energetic in a way I hadn't heard in months. "The promotion is all but official," he said, opening a bottle of wine. "Senior partner by Christmas. It means more travel, unfortunately, but also a significant salary increase." "That's wonderful," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. We had dinner at the dining room table, the good china and cloth napkins creating an artificial formality that made me feel like I was play acting. Robert talked about his plans for the promotion, the clients he'd cultivate, the future he saw stretching ahead of us. "We could finally take that European vacation you've always wanted," he said. "Tour the art museums, see the places you used to paint." Used to paint. Past tense, like that part of me was dead and buried. "That sounds nice. You seem quiet tonight. Everything all right?" I looked at my husband across the candlelit table, this man I'd shared most of my adult life with, who thought he knew me, who was making plans for our future while I harbored secrets that would destroy him. "Robert," I began, then stopped. The words wouldn't come. How do you tell someone their life is about to implode? How do you confess to betrayals that will change everything? Yes? Nothing. Just tired. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "I know I've been distracted lately. Focused on work at the expense of everything else. But things will be different after the promotion. We'll have more time together." The kindness in his voice made me want to weep. This was the man I'd married, buried somewhere under years of routine and ambition. If he'd shown me this attention 6 months ago, would things have been different? But it was too late for hypotheticals. Carol Thompson had seen me in Jack's kitchen, and the truth was spreading through our neighborhood like ripples in a pond. It was only a matter of time before those ripples reached Robert. That night, I lay awake beside my sleeping husband and tried to imagine the conversation that was coming. He would be hurt, confused, angry. He would ask how long it had been going on, whether I loved the other man, whether our entire marriage had been a lie. I didn't have good answers to any of those questions. At 3 a.m, I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. Through the window, I could see Jack's house, dark except for a single light in what I knew was his bedroom. Was he awake too, wondering what would happen next? My phone buzzed with a text message. Jack. Can't sleep either? I typed back quickly. No. What do we do now? We wait. And when the time comes, we decide what's more important, protecting the lie or living the truth. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Then I went back to bed and lay beside Robert, watching him sleep, memorizing his peaceful expression. The call came the next afternoon. Susan Henderson, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. Margaret, dear, I think there's something you should know. Carol Thompson has been spreading some rather disturbing rumors about your neighbor. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. What kind of rumors? About Jack Martinez and some mystery woman. Carol claims she saw them together in his house, acting very intimate. She won't say who the woman was, but she's implying it's someone from the neighborhood. Someone married. The room tilted around me. That's terrible. I thought you should know, in case Robert hears about it. Men can be so unreasonable about these things, even when their wives aren't involved. After Susan hung up, I sat in my perfect living room and felt the last of my composure crumble. It was happening. The avalanche I'd set in motion was finally burying everything in its path. I had perhaps hours before someone connected the dots, before my name was whispered in the same breath as scandal and adultery. Before Robert came home to find his reputation, his promotion, his carefully ordered life in ruins. I picked up my phone and dialed Jack's number. We need to talk, I said when he answered. I know. I've been getting looks all day. Mrs. Patterson crossed the street to avoid me. Meet me at our place in an hour. Our place. The cafe where we'd first kissed, where we'd fallen in love, where everything had started. It seemed fitting that it should end there too. He was waiting for me at our usual table, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between his hands. When he saw me, he stood, and for a moment I thought he might try to hug me. Instead, he sat back down. So, he said. Here we are. Here we are. What do you want to do? I'd been asking myself that question for weeks, and finally, sitting across from this man who'd awakened everything I thought was dead inside me, I knew the answer. I want to disappear, I said. I want to pack a bag and drive somewhere no one knows our names and start over completely. We could do that. Could we? Really? I don't know. But we could try. I looked at him, really looked, and saw my future reflected in his eyes. Not the safe, predictable future Robert offered, but something wild and uncertain and absolutely terrifying. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I. But you'd do it? Leave everything behind? For you? Yes. The simple certainty of his answer undid me. I reached across the table and took his hand, no longer caring who might see. Then let's go, I said. Before I lose my nerve. Before Robert comes home. Before the whole world explodes. We paid for our untouched coffee and walked to the parking lot together. At my car, he kissed me one last time as Margaret Williams, respectable wife and neighbor. When I drove away an hour later, bag hastily packed, wedding ring left on Robert's pillow, I was someone else entirely. Someone whose story was just beginning. I never looked back.